And this is my interpretation of the moon conjuncting midheaven synastry. This is my astrology synastry series. So I view the synastry to be a bit superficial despite the moon representing authenticity. The reason being, the moon suggests many different things like authenticity, comfortability, protection, nurturing, safety, and tradition to some degree. However, the moon person in this synastry is a bit deceptive, as the moon can be. If you are reading or listening to this, what I've just stated may come at a shock or with denial, though what's done in the dark will always be brought to the light. And so let's continue. The moon person in the synastry will appear or become whatever they need to be, and in this case, nurturing, loving, compassionate, understanding, and passive in order to secure the midheaven person. The dynamic of the synastry can be in the vice versa, but traditionally speaking, let's say the man is the midheaven person and the moon is the woman. The woman will be raised to only seek successful men who can provide financially and to protect them. Anything less than is unacceptable. Herein lies the deception to me, due to the woman only seeking a successful, attractive man who can provide comfort and stability. I find that the woman in this example would choose money over love. This is deceptive because the moon person will appear otherwise. As always, this depends on the sign that the moon and the midheaven are in. If the man and the woman have this in Capricorn, this dynamic would be okay. Why? Because the Capricorn midheaven person will want to provide and have the moon person that is an extension of them. Have you ever heard of the term, it ain't tricking if you got it? That pretty much sums it up. If, for example, the moon in the midheaven is in Capricorn for this synastry. Now, to avoid being too specific, because this is a generalized interpretation of the synastry, I genuinely find this couple or the moon person to be deceptive. The midheaven is the provider and the moon person is the receiver. And I promise the moon person will do everything in their power to receive whatever makes them comfortable, especially financially. Understand, astrologically, the moon is ruled by Cancer, and despite popular belief, Cancerian energy is all about feeling secure and safe, and need I remind you, the more money you have determines your quality of life. And Cancerian energy craves a high-quality lifestyle. Therefore, money is very important in this synastry, so back to my statement about what's done in the dark always coming to the light, being very true. The moon person will appear to give unconditional love towards the midheaven person. However, the moment life happens and the midheaven person who was once on top experiences lows, the moon person who usually has superficial intentions will be exposed. Money is the main cause of breakup in arguments and relationships, and though we are taught conjunctions in astrology are positive, the synastry aspect will prove that to be wrong. We can all relate to some degree that we've been taught to avoid struggle love or a broke person. So starting off, this belief and expectation does not describe unconditional love, which is supposed to be the moon's energy. This here is describing, I will love you and treat you with care and concern so long as you provide for me financially and make me look good to others. The moment this changes, which the moon often does, I will change. When we think of marriage vows, it quotes until death does us part, and in sickness and in health. How often do you see marriage vows being voided out and forgotten the moment the provider in the relationship gets sick and now has to depend on the moon person? Or if the midheaven person gets locked up and again has to depend on the moon person? Or if the midheaven person loses their job and or is disgraced publicly in some way? You will always see, because things have been brought to the light, that the moon person is leaving. Another note to make here is how heavily dependent the moon person is on the midheaven person in this synastry. The moon person's quality of life is dependent on the midheaven person. Therefore, the moon person may apply pressure for the midheaven person to do and to be better. And this sounds great, right? But this is where the deception lies. The moon person will apply pressure for the midheaven person to succeed, but secretly, which is moon energy, the moon person wants a better life, but doesn't have the ability to provide it for themselves. The moon person is lazy to some degree and does not have the ability to work for what they want. They prefer for it to be given to them on a platter. Now, I do have a sister, and I do not know the synastry that she shares with her husband. However, I remember hearing my mother telling me that, my sister called her crying because her husband wasn't ambitious enough, Mind you, my sister doesn't work and has 2 children with him. My sister also has a college degree, but she does not use it and has no intention of doing so, which has become obvious. Back to what's done in the dark is always brought to the light. For the moon person to keep up their deceptive charade, they will want to have children to further project a trajectory that they need the midheaven person to work hard and to provide for their family. The midheaven person, feeling obligated and responsible, will submit to the demands and needs of the quote-unquote family, in which was strategically created in the first place. Now, if you do not have children with this aspect, at some point there will be, especially if the moon person intuits that this will surely make the midheaven person feel responsible to provide a better life. And or the moon person will try to get houses, bills, and family involved to again make the midheaven person feel responsible and obligated to provide. In extreme cases, the moon person can even subconsciously make themselves sick to again ensure and enforce that the midheaven person feels responsible for them. The 10th house that the midheaven resides in always is about how others see you, similar to the ascendant in astrology. Therefore, the midheaven person will do anything within their power to maintain a positive public image, because image plays a role in how one makes money. Imagine being sick and your midheaven person leaves you. This would undoubtedly make them look bad. Imagine being pregnant and your midheaven person leaves you. Again, this would undoubtedly make you look bad, and so forth. The moon person uses this power to their advantage. The synastry aspect will work for some because a lot of people need someone to need them. Otherwise, they feel obsolete. But both the moon and the midheaven person need to be important and needed because it ensures that the other person will not go anywhere. So in actuality, both parties are deceptive, but it works until it doesn't. In a toxic sense, when the moon person wants to leave the midheaven person, he or she will not be able to, and the midheaven person will have no problem reminding them of that fact. So for example, think of a woman who has children, does not work, and depends on the man to provide, but the relationship has become abusive. The woman in this example is trapped due to not having work experience, money, friends, because her friends come from the midheaven person as well, and or at worst, fear of losing her children in a custody battle. The midheaven has the power, the midheaven person has the power in such a situation, whereas initially the woman held the power. What the woman once used to her advantage has now become her downfall. The power switches. All the illusions and deceptions are exposed and brought to the light. Have you ever seen the movie Enough by Jennifer Lopez? That's the vibe, especially if things go sour. If the moon person wants to leave the midheaven person, the midheaven person will also resort to making the moon person appear unstable, a gold digger, a hoe, a low-down dirty dog. This is done with ease because the midheaven person has more connections and power, whereas the moon person only had power within the home. Keep in mind, if the moon person is the man and the midheaven person is the woman, what I've just described is equally valid. If the midheaven person is the woman, she is the breadwinner or has more financially, and the moon person being the man depends on her. If things are all good, the midheaven person will secretly make sure she does things to make the moon person more dependent on her, but it'll appear like she has his best interests at heart. If the moon person, being the man, wants to leave her for whatever reason, he will find out that he cannot. Maybe the midheaven person will accuse the moon person of being a drunk, a user, unfit, unstable, a deadbeat, a liar, and or a cheater. Whatever the case or scenario, the midheaven person truly has the power in this dynamic and will yield it whenever the situation calls for it, which in turn reminds the moon person to sit the fuck down and shut up. Know for a fact that the moon person will be the one in court asking for alimony, child support, or half in the divorce. Please believe that. The midheaven person can take a massive loss as well in this synastry. When we think of it's cheaper to keep her, this synastry embodies such a statement, especially if things go awry. The moon person trying to take everything from the midheaven person will only occur if the midheaven person is the one trying to leave the relationship. Now, if the moon person tries to leave, the midheaven person will make the moon person lose everything or attempt to. You truly see another person's true colors when money is involved. If you were wondering, I can confirm the moon conjunct midheaven is a marriage indicator, but I caution you to tread lightly. I think this placement will work out well for moon conjunct midheaven in Capricorn, Virgo, and Taurus. because they are more long-term signs and will more than likely cheat on each other and be okay with it than to leave or to change things, with the exception of the moon conjunct midheaven in Scorpio. This couple does not trust anyone and rather stay together than to start all over with someone else. They would rather die, literally. In conclusion, I am not saying the synastry aspect will not work, because most will make it work. Just know that if things end or there's a threat of an ending, there will be hell to pay, emphasis on pay. Both individuals will create situations that are difficult to detach from to ensure you do not go anywhere and to continue playing your role. Side note, I had a conversation with my sister once, and I asked her if she was scared of her husband cheating on her, and she said no. He knows I'll take him to court for alimony, child support, and to maintain my quality of life. Mind you, her husband is successful. She wasn't concerned, nor did she mention how she would feel if he cheated. Her immediate response went towards finances and how she'd ruin him. Mind you, she has a Scorpio moon, but again, I do not know the synastry she shares with her husband. Now, on a positive note, this couple will stay together with each other for a long time, depending on the sign. However, they both have plan B and C waiting to be enacted if one person gets out of line. Another thing I would also like to note, if this does not revolve around career, finances, and money, just know that the theme of this synastry is that the midheaven has something that the moon person needs. It's not about a want, it's about a need. And, need, we can't go without our needs being met. We can go without our wants, but we can't go without our needs. And so there is a level of desperation here. And whatever the case is, you see people's true colors in So again, I repeat, if this has nothing to do with finances, children, bills, or anything like that, just know that the midheaven person has what the moon person needs. Okay, and so if one of them leave, okay, it's gonna be a problem. The moon person depends on the midheaven person, and the midheaven to some degree depends on the moon person. Okay. So again, if one of them threatens to leave or is leaving, there's going to be hell to pay on both sides. All right. So if the midheaven loses what they were able to provide before because of the moon person, the midheaven person is going to make the moon person pay for real. Now, if the midheaven person or the moon person is trying to leave the midheaven person, again, the midheaven depends on the moon to some degree. Maybe it's some type of emotional thing, or it could be possession, depending on the sign. There's going to be hell to pay. All right. So this is my interpretation of the moon conjunct the midheaven in synastry. Another thing I thought about with the moon heaven, getting revenge if the moon person leaves, it's like the moon person, let's say that's the woman and she has children with the midheaven person. And so the midheaven's person, if the moon person leaves me, then that means I'm going to take a loss as the midheaven person. Now I have to pay all this stuff, and she's going to take my kids, right? So that's where the midheaven person will get, kind of revengeful, because it's if the moon person leaves, though I don't necessarily need the moon person has something that could ruin me if it's taken away, right? So again, if the moon person has the children, and the moon person's trying to leave, the midheaven person's like, oh, hell no. I'm going to make you look as crazy as possible, because if you take the kids away, I'm going to lose money. I'm going to lose this. I'm going to lose my quality of life that I put in work to build. So the midheaven person is more so trying to protect their assets, or what it is that they have, from the moon person if the moon person decides to leave. Whereas the moon person actually needs the midheaven person, period. Needs them. And if the moon person decides to leave, the moon person's usually going to receive more. Whatever that more is. They're going to receive everything that the midheaven person has worked so hard for, because the midheaven person is essentially the one who's working, putting in the work. Whatever that work is, whether that's financially or some type of investment, there's some type of investment that's been had. So I just wanted to add that in for those of you who are like, well, I don't have kids, or I don't have this, so da 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 da. There's so many different ways to look at it.